Dear viewers, subscribe to the channel and put a like on the video so YouTube can recommend you new stories and new chapters. If anything, you can always remove the like if you don't like the story. Thank you for your support, and here we go. Secrets of the Library. Chapter 2. Meanwhile, Rose didn't know how long she had been here, but it seemed like an eternity. She was cold, damp, and terribly hungry. She woke up here, undressed and chained to the wall opposite Lily, whose bruised, pale, and dirty body she saw curled up in her corner, staring blankly at their tiny hell. Once in a while the girls were fed, a disgusting broth with undercooked chunks of horse meat. You could probably tell by how hungry they were that this horrible food was starting to seem normal to them. Lately, however, they had been brought only a little iron-flavored water, obviously dirty even in the dim reddish light that filtered into the room from the other side of the door. Both women felt ill, vomiting constantly, and neither of them could sleep. After a couple of days, a husky, incessant whispering began, which they could not muffle no matter how hard they tried. They never spoke of it out loud, but they both knew they would be defiled. It hadn't happened yet, but the horrible men had treated them horribly, peeping and making grotesque gestures. One day, a few days ago, one of the human beings suddenly grabbed Lily and started touching her legs. In her weakened state, she could only cry. But the others grabbed him and began beating him mercilessly. He continued to struggle, trying to reach her until his skull was fractured. One of the beast-like men glared at her and spoke one of the few words any of them had uttered. "Not ready yet." At first, he and Lily talked, encouraging each other and looking for a way out. But the chains were huge, and they had nothing to work with. Time passed, hope faded, and she and Lily spent more and more time in silence, staring fixedly into each other's eyes. Lily's gaunt look began to remind her of their grotesque captors, shoulders hunched, hands curled like claws. Worst of all, her eyes grew darker and darker, seeming to lose that beautiful blue color Rose loved so much. Rose shuddered at the sound of the metal door opening and backed into her corner of the stone chamber. Two shapeless men dragged something inside. It was a man, a large blonde-haired man, badly beaten, breathing in slow, shallow, labored breaths. His shirt and boots were missing. The two kidnappers brought in a set of shackles and chained him to a large iron brace in the middle of the floor. Then they corrected Lily and Rose's chains to allow them to walk a couple more feet before walking out. The door slammed shut. Rose crawled to the new limit of her chain and tried to bring the man to his senses. Despite the blood, he felt clean, somehow better than his surroundings. Lily did the same, shaking him gently and whispering. He moved, but didn't wake up. Rose leaned closer. His scent filled her nostrils. She felt her mouth go dry. Rose jerked back sharply when she saw Lily do the same, her eyes widening in horror. Now they knew. They knew what the food was. They knew why it had stopped. It was just that the creatures had brought fresher food this time. The whispers grew louder, and she was sure they were making vile, unspeakable promises, unless the girls. Rose heard a loud whimper and looked at Lily, realizing it was both of them doing it. Simultaneously, they grabbed each other's hands in an unbreakable grip. "No," Rose wondered for a second which one of them had spoken, then realized it was her. Lily closed her eyes, and Rose saw them flash back to their former bright blue light, hard and determined for a moment. "I'd rather die." They both knew they were really going to die, and they began to sob, almost silently, leaning against each other. They hugged each other, protecting the wounded man, until they fell into a heavy, useless half-sleep. Meanwhile, Ken was bending over the breathless body. He'd smashed its head with his old trench mace, if the ape-like figure was really a man. Trench mace was faster and more reliable than a knife, and far less noisy than the shotgun that hung at his back. He left his backpack of dynamite at the entrance. After he found the room with the bodies of men and women, he went back and finished off the two beast men he had knocked out and tied up. There would be no prisoners, and he decided he didn't want to hear any answers they might give. The men were strange-looking, degenerate, slouching, muscular, with large unblinking eyes and big yellow teeth that looked like shovels. At the sight of them, he got a bad feeling. The repulsive things were familiar. figures from the past that he hoped would never meet him again. He found a truck, though it was pretty battered, but useless. He also found what appeared to be the entrance to hell. The cave system was dimly lit with oil lamps dotted throughout the chambers. The floor was somewhat level, and the different chambers were used as rooms for different purposes. The slaughterhouse was the worst, but the floors in the other rooms were flooded with slop as well. In one of the rooms, he found almost pure Gambini alcohol. Originally, it was going to be diluted with water and tinted to make ersatz whiskey, but now it was spoiled for any purpose. The barrels had been opened. Peering around the corner of the tunnel, which seemed to lead steeply downward, he saw two repulsive men peering through a grate in the metal door. They were talking in harsh voices. They didn't feed. Why didn't they eat? Something's wrong. They're broken. Somehow. The other bellowed angrily. We didn't do anything wrong. One of them pulled out a bunch of keys and started unlocking the door. With another glance at the passageway, Ken slid silently toward them, holding his mace at the ready. The lid over the tiny grate pulled back, letting more of the dim red light into the cell. Rose looked at Lily, then at the blonde man. He was still alive. She could feel his heart beating. The appetizing smell was no longer as appealing as it had been at first. She felt stronger, better. The incessant feeling of nausea was gone for the first time since she'd woken up here. Through the window in the door, intense eyes looked at them. Somehow she felt that one of them was actually Mr. Pike, though she couldn't really make them out, and indeed it was hard to tell them apart. She could feel their disappointment that the blonde had managed to survive. Glancing over, she saw a defiant expression on Lily's face that she knew echoed her own. Terrible people would continue to be disappointed. She returned her gaze to the door as she heard the sound of a key turning and found her voice. You might as well kill us. No matter how much you hurt us, we'll never be like you. Mr. Pike started to answer, but he was suddenly dragged away from the window with a strange crunching sound. A moment later, something hit the cell door hard. There was a strange tugging sound, replaced by light. Then the door swung wide open. Suddenly, as if a radio had been turned off, the horrible whispering scrabbling in her skull abruptly stopped. A dark figure appeared in the doorway, holding an overly bright lamp in one hand and clutching some kind of heavy club in the other. Ken dragged the bodies away from the door. They were too focused to hear his approach, and the mace made quick work of them. Grabbing one of the oil lamps, he swung the door open. The room was a scene out of a madman's nightmare. The walls, floor, and ceiling were covered in sludge, and two skinny figures leaned aggressively over the man's writhing body. He was just beginning to take a step forward to kill the monsters when a realization came. These were women, and he knew them. Rose. Lily. Rose sat stunned, staring at Ken. Lily started to babble incoherently and reached for him, but was suddenly stopped by the chains. He stepped back, pulled out the keys to the door, and quickly unlocked the chains. We need to get out of here. I don't know exactly how many there are, but it looks like they're feeding, by the dozens. He looked calculatingly at the large blonde-haired man. Rose spoke up. We have to take him with us. We can't leave him here for them. You'll have to call him. I need to check the passageway. He handed her the keys and stepped out into the hallway while she tried to unlock the last lock. She could feel the hope stirring in her and Lily, the weakness and fear fading away. Without further ado, she and Lily lifted the man to his feet, much more easily than she had expected, and throwing his arms over each of their shoulders, dragged him toward the exit. In the hallway, she saw Ken pull out a shotgun from behind his back and point it down the hallway at waist level. Girls, move, they're coming. As they squeezed past him toward the painful light of the entrance, he began firing, just holding the trigger and working the bolt, creating a long, thundering wave of sound. Rose looked back and wished she hadn't. In the dim, flickering light, she saw a mass of shapeless bodies pushing through the corridor out of the darkness. A hail of roaring shotgun blasts felled those in front and tripped those behind, but the horde kept moving forward. Finally, the shotgun fell silent as it ran out of ammunition. Rose flung the man's arm away and shouted to Lily, "Get him outside." Ken lowered the shotgun to the sling and drew his revolver to fire down the hallway, throwing back all the creatures that had escaped the tangle of bodies. Rose grabbed an oil lamp and threw it into the hallway, where it burst into flames, splattering everything around it with burning oil. That sent them scrambling back, and she grabbed another oil lamp, then a third. The hallway was full of flames. She wasn't sure what was holding them back, fear of the fire or pain from the light. Ken grabbed her arm and started pushing her toward the entrance. "Run!" Even dragging the blonde-haired man behind her, Lily was farther away than she had expected. Rose had no time to do anything when one of the disfigured ape men suddenly jumped out of the side passage at Lily and her ward. Lily didn't hesitate. Instead of screaming or trying to run away, she threw the blonde-haired man aside and lunged at the beast with a furious hiss. The ape man was visibly shaken by Lily's strength and tried to hold her back. Rose noticed that Lily had changed again. Dark-eyed and maniacal, she snapped her shovel-like teeth at his face. Anger slammed into Rose as she saw her Lily, struggling. A second later, she felt her own teeth sink into the twisted man's neck, her claws digging into his sides. He lost his grip on Lily, and she tore at his throat with force. They were tearing toward him in a red haze of hatred and rage, until a voice came through the noise in his ears. "Girls, he's dead. Leave him alone." She looked at Ken, pulling back. He looked less shaken than he should have. Lily leaned over the blonde-haired man, and for a second Rose feared for her sanity, but Lily lifted her head, her blue eyes sparkling. "We have to keep going. I can feel them getting bigger, a lot bigger." Rose felt it too, grim thoughts full of hatred as the creatures crawled out of their slime pits and rushed upwards almost mindlessly. Those behind would soon drive those ahead through the flames. Ken kicked the door open and burst into the room. "Rose, help me with this." He pointed to several barrels. "That's raw spirit. It will burn." Rose felt herself grinning. "There's enough here for half the city." They tipped over barrels, pouring out gallons and gallons of alcohol. If anywhere on Earth needed a fire to burn, it was here. They splashed the liquid back into the hallway, and Ken fired a couple shots toward the falling mass of bodies. Lily was already standing in the sunlight with the injured man, and her face spread into a smile when she saw them walk outside. Ken shouted after her, "Keep running, Lily!" They slowed for only a second in the painful sunlight. Rosa caught up with them and looked back to see Ken pick up a dull brown bag at the entrance, do something with it, toss it back into the cave, and then run. "Go to the right!" As they caught up, Rosa felt the ground slip from under her feet, and they tumbled down the steep slope. The top of the rocky ridge erupted in smoke and flames. A wave of debris flew right out of the entrance, and then the whole slope seemed to lift and settle. When they stopped, Ken stood up and quickly reloaded his rifle, looking around the ridge for movement. They froze and listened. A strange low rumbling and crackling underfoot indicated further collapses deep underground. Rose grabbed the heavy stone and looked around, while Lily examined the blonde-haired man. As far as Rose could tell, the blonde man had only a little more to add to his injuries. He was beginning to show vague signs of consciousness. The crunching-like sounds continued for a while, and the hills seemed to melt away. Ken looked at them. "Can you walk?" Lily smiled slyly. "Yeah, we'll walk to the moon and back to get out of here." She stopped, looking around and squinting against the sunlight. Then she looked at Ken. "Where are we even? I don't know which way to go." "We're about 100 miles southeast of St. Louis. You only have to walk about a mile or so to my truck, that way." He pointed his finger, "and we'll drive the rest of the way." Lily smiled. A genuine smile, though Rose thought the effect was a little spoiled. She squared her shoulders and gestured at Rose. "We'll bring Blondie here, and you be ready to shoot any of those things if any of them get out." "Are you sure you can catch him?" "Yeah, he's not as heavy as he looks." Lily and Rose lifted him easily, and Ken led them to the truck. Despite the rocky ground, Rose realized that her legs didn't hurt, and she and Lily easily managed the unconscious man. Soon they reached the truck, where they put the man in the back, and Ken pulled a tattered fiberboard suitcase from under the front seat. He pulled out a pair of white shirts and a bar of harsh lye soap. Handing Rosa the soap, Ken gestured to the pool of spring water. I'm sure it's a little cool, but you need to wash that dried slop off. Before he could finish his sentence, both girls were in the water, scrubbing desperately with all their might. Rose found that using a handful of sand scrubbed away much faster than soap. Their hair was so matted that Rose was afraid she'd never be able to wash it out, but after a while it unraveled and came out, though it was obvious that Lily's platinum hair was dully colored, at least for now. If you squinted, you could pretend it was a natural light brown color. She felt even more exposed now that she was clean and quickly put on one of the white shirts, noticing that Lily did the same with the same haste. Without a towel, they would have to rely on the sun to dry themselves and their new dresses. It wouldn't take long in this heat. Ken didn't even seem to notice their nakedness, only handing them their shirts. The shirts covered more than the dresses they wore in the dance halls, but it still seemed a little indecent to Rose. Ken took some apples and carrots out of his bag and held out a couple to each. He seemed to look at them with some apprehension, and Rose noticed that he kept one hand close to the revolver on his belt. Rose took a bite of the apple and chewed slowly. It tasted clean, sweet, and perfect. What happened? Ken hesitated for a moment. Why were you there? Rosa spent the next few minutes telling him how they'd been kidnapped and mistreated, and he asked terse questions. She didn't procrastinate, woodenly telling him how they'd been fed and when they'd realized what was happening. When she finished, she didn't even meet his gaze. Lily seemed to be holding her breath. Ken nodded slowly, chewing his apple. That fits with what I've seen and heard. I don't know what they were trying to turn you into, but I guess they decided they failed. It's not your fault, you know. He held up a hand to stop their shamed responses. They were shocked that you didn't feed on the treasury agent here? Seeing their shocked faces, he pulled his wallet from his pocket and opened it, revealing his badge and ID. John Dietrich, Treasury Department. I found his wallet in this mess. The whole experience seemed to hit Lily at once. She sank awkwardly to the ground, sitting cross-legged in the violet bush, and stared at her hands with wide, bright blue eyes. Oh, that's a doozy. We almost ate the treasurer? She began to shake, and Rose rushed to her, knelt down, and hugged her. Ken gave them time to recover. Lily finally calmed down and smiled weakly. You know, Sister Mary Ann from St. Tristan's probably expected us to turn out like this. Rose couldn't suppress a giggle at that. Ken shook his head. It's not what you did. It's what they did to you. And they failed. They failed to turn you into monsters, no matter what they set out to do. He paused. Not completely, anyway. You know you've changed when you dealt with the one in the tunnel? Lily looked at her nails for a second. Yes, I could feel it and see Rose changing, and changing back. You also carried the big guy for a whole mile over rocky ground, like he weighed nothing. You weren't tired, and most of the cuts and scrapes you got from falling down the hill are gone by now. Rose looked at her skin and saw that, except for a few light, fading bruises, there were no marks on it, and neither was Lily. She looked at Ken again. Why doesn't that surprise you? I saw something during the war, something the Huns sometimes let loose at night. Very much like those creatures in the caves. I've heard other stories too. A low voice grunted from the back seat of the truck. I saw and heard something too. Thanks for getting me out of there. And didn't eat me. The blond man weakly rose to a sitting position, holding his ribs. He looked around them, one eye swollen shut. Ken looked at him with an indifferent expression. Back among the living. Basically, there were creatures like these in the Bellow Forest. They usually hunted at night, ate people, and hated the light. He smiled slightly. Especially the light from the kerosene bombs we made out of glass bottles. For a split second, the man and Ken's exchanged a wicked smirk. Now what? We're heading back to St. Louis. The cave collapsed, so unless someone wants to excavate a few thousand tons of rock, it's over. Rose listened for a moment. I think they've all disappeared. I can't feel them anymore. Lily shook her head. Me too. The man looked at Ken. So you're just going to give me a ride into town? Rose intervened in the conversation. Do you have any better suggestions? The treasury agent looked at her, then back at Ken. Does she even know who you are? Better question is, who do you think I am? Federale huffed even more. Rumor has it that Gambini brought in a professional, a guy they just call Silence. Tell me about it. I thought it was a creepy story for little kids. The federal agent half smiled. Yeah, I don't think all those stories are true, but I just saw a mountain full of monsters, so if I were making a bet, I'd say more of the stories are true than I thought. Ken shrugged. The agent looked at Rose and Lily. Lily mimicked Ken's shoulder and then put her arm around Rose's waist. I don't care if he's a Kaiser in disguise. He got all three of us out of there. So, Dietrich, if it's all the same to you, I might as well go home. Ken examined Agent Dietrich, splinting a leg that he thought might be broken. Finished, he looked at Dietrich, who was watching the girls somewhat warily. I think the girls should ride up front with me. It took Rose a second to realize that Ken was really worried that Lily and she wouldn't be able to resist her urges. She was sure that feeling had passed. At least, almost certain. But all in all, it seemed like a wise decision. Agent Dietrich nodded. There's no point in being careless. I wonder if you could lend me a gun, just in case. Ken shook his head slowly, amused. Here's your pass. I have a cabin at Lost Valley Resort, about 30 miles from here. We should make it before dark. We'll decide the rest later. Rose was between Ken and Lily as they pulled onto the road. Under other circumstances, the ride would have been horrible. The road was winding and the truck bounced over bumps, but they were driving away from this horrible, hellish place. Rose admitted to herself that being between Lily and Ken wasn't so scary. Lily only lasted a few minutes before falling asleep with her head in Rose's lap. Although she fought sleep for longer, after half an hour, Rose found herself drifting off to sleep as fatigue took over from Ken. Her last thought was when he gently put his arm around her and helped her get comfortable. When Rose woke up, the first thing she noticed was the absence of the noise of the truck. The second thing she noticed was Lily's bright smile as she looked down at her. Wake up, sleepyhead. Rose struggled to her feet, looking around the dense thicket. The changing light of the evening sun shone through the trees. Lily smiled. He'll be right back. He'll make sure it's clear and we can slip into the cabin. Then she sat down more seriously next to Rose. He said to wait here for a few days in case any of it went away, and for Mr. Dietrich to call a doctor. I think he wants to make sure we don't deliver a dead treasurer to the police station. After a few minutes, Ken slipped silently out from under the bush. Everyone's quiet. Our cabin is the last one on the trail, so no one should be walking here. The federal agent was conscious, but unable to walk, but Rosa and Lily lifted him easily and followed Ken through the trees to the small cabin. Once inside, Ken made sure the curtains were drawn, and Rosa and Lily laid Dietrich on the couch. Ken explained that while he was checking the cabin, he had also made his way to the main office and used the only phone to call the doctor who would examine Dietrich before morning, no questions asked. Returning, he sat them down. I also called a friend who may know more about what's going on with you two. She'll be here tomorrow night. A friend? Lily sounded as disappointed as Rose. It stunned her. She was already starting to think of Ken as hers and Lily's. A lady I know. She owns Beauchamp's Voodoo Lounge nightclub. She knows about things like these. He gestured at them. Lily smiled. We've gone there a couple times for double dates. You know, there's a cellar you can go down into and choose the wine of your choice. Rose chuckled. I remember that. There are places where you can look up right through the cracks in the dance floor. Lily burst into laughter. She tried to catch her breath, tears streaming from her eyes. Rose said, Lily, I think there's a serious shortage of lingerie in this town. Even Dietrich laughed at that. Rose took over the bathroom so she and Lily could clean up more thoroughly. Ken brought 2 more clean shirts for them to put on. That's all I have right now, but there's a little store here where I can buy you a couple dresses when it opens in the morning. This place specializes in quiet retreats for men of means and their nieces where they can relax. Rose couldn't help herself. She smirked. Why, Mr. Stanton, what a place you've lured us to. A second later, Lily snuggled against Ken's side, joined in Rose's comment, and raised her blue eyes to him. Uncle Ken, how can we express our gratitude for this wonderful vacation? He shook his head regretfully. If I'd known I'd be treating a treasury agent and looking after a couple of kids, I'd have looked for a family resort with bigger cabins, and maybe bring some clothes for the two of you. Rose wrinkled her nose. What's so interesting about that? She thought she'd gotten as bad at flirting as Lily had. It took a few minutes and a lot of water to clean up. Poor Lily scrubbed her pale hair until the last traces of slop were gone. After Ken had cleaned himself up, they tried to wash Dietrich as gently as possible. He was weaker than before, and she could tell he was in more pain than he let on. She could smell pain and weakness. A surreptitiously cast glance told her that Lily felt the same way. There were only 3 rooms in the hut: a living room, a bedroom, and a bathroom. Only the bathroom had a door that could be closed, and it didn't lock. Lily felt like her hunger was over, and though she could feel the agent's pain and weakness, it no longer made her gag and her stomach rumble. But daylight was almost gone, and hunger and voices were always stronger at night. She didn't worry about Ken. He never smelled like food. Dietrich, as if reading her thoughts, rolled over onto his side. I'm not trying to be ungrateful, and I realize I'll be staying here for a couple of days. It's just that I'd be more comfortable if you had a room you could lock me in at night, or lock them in, or something. He fell silent, waiting for an argument. Rose spoke before Ken could say anything. No, it's okay. I'm not sure I trust us yet either. I feel pretty normal right now, but I don't know how we'll act at night. In the dark, it feels worse. Ken looked around. I'll see if I can rent another cabin tomorrow, but we'll have to come up with something for tonight. Second aisle, 3rd shelf, Lily pronounced. Ken looked at her in bewilderment. Lily suddenly blushed and seemed confused. Rose piped up, Oh, Mrs. Harrison's books. She turned to Ken. Those books we were supposed to put in the closed crypt. 2nd aisle, 3rd shelf, where the books with the bound women are. Lily regained her composure and grinned in a cheeky grin. If things get bad for us, you can always resort to the 4th shelf. And the 5th. So Rose and Lily found themselves bound and gently placed on the bed. Lily was playing hard to get, playfully asking to be tucked in, and making teasing remarks the whole time Ken was tying them up. He responded to her remarks with good humor. Despite Lily's entreaties to snuggle up to him, Ken pulled the padded chair to the doorway between the living room and the bedroom. Dietrich still looked worried. A few seconds after she lay down, Rose fell into a dreamless, whisperless sleep. The next morning, Rosa was awakened by bright sunlight. She had one arm around Lily. She rose abruptly, realizing that the shackles had been removed. She jumped off the bed and rushed to the doorway. Ken stood next to a well-dressed but scary-looking weasel-like man who was examining Dietrich. Ken bestowed a half-smile on her. I took the ropes off you after sunrise, about 3 hours ago. You weren't awake at all. The strange man she had mistaken for the expected doctor spoke up. It would be best if you leave him here until his condition stabilizes. A couple days or so. The doctor didn't look in her direction. Apparently, he had decided that the less he knew, the better for him. True to his word, Ken went out and returned with 2 dresses. Here you go, for Lily. He pulled a light blue shift out of his bag. And one for Rose. He held out the light yellow shift to Rose. He walked out while they changed, though Lily, giggling, beckoned him to follow. It's not like you haven't seen everything yet, you know. Then both girls went down to the store on their own, and Ken told them to buy everything they needed for a couple of days and have the clerk bill them in the cabin. 2 negligées, 2 gowns, 4 more dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, and 2 charming cloche hats. And here they are checking out with a very tactful clerk, who solemnly transfers their acquisitions to their uncle's account. As they walked slowly back down the path, Lily looked at Rose. Do you feel the same way about Ken as I do? Rose nodded. It's a we thing. Not just you or me with him, but us. He's ours now, or we're his, or something like that. Thank heavens. I feel that way too. Lily giggled. I hope he ate all the vegetables. He'll need all his strength when we dump the Chamberlain. For as long as I can remember, I haven't wanted a man like that. Me too. Rose and Lily walked briskly toward the cabin. But as soon as they opened the door, Rose felt a rush of anger. It was an odor, something like a sense of smell. The smell of something wrong, something unclean, like the man thing, but different. Out of the corner of her eye, She saw Lily's eyes darken, her lips curl with a hiss, exposing elongated teeth, her hands folded into claws. "Stop!" Ken quickly stepped between the doorway and the rest of the cabin, raising his hands to ward them off. He blocked them from the figure behind him, a woman veiled and draped in yards of ornate fabric. The odor, however, was coming from the towering figure behind her. A huge bald man, stiff, powerful, and black as pitch. Rose and Lily froze, trying to keep from throwing Ken aside and lunging at the huge figure, until the woman in the veil turned and gestured at the looming creature. It moved thoughtfully into the bathroom and closed the door. Agent Dietrich watched them from the couch, keeping as still as possible, trying not to even breathe. Rose felt her rage fading away, at least sufficiently, and felt Lily's fury subside. The woman lowered her veil. It was a dark-skinned woman with an Aquilonian nose and dark, hypnotic eyes. She looked them over slowly. "I apologize. None of the ghouls can tolerate the presence of zombies. I did not take that into account." There were soft notes of Spanish moss and African music in her voice. "I am Marie Beauchamp. I think I understand why Mr. Stanton has requested my presence." She slowly walked over and extended one hand to Rose and the other to Lily. She slowly touched each girl's face. "Ghoul kept you two together in the same room, didn't he?" Rose nodded. "They've chained us together." The woman looked them over from head to toe, then shook her head. "That was a ghoul mistake. You're not just friends, you're lovers." Rose blushed slightly when Ken raised an eyebrow amusedly. It was the first time anyone other than her, and Lily had acknowledged it, said it out loud. Lily pursed her lips and stepped forward, standing to her full height, arms crossed and jaw set. "So? You have a problem with that?" The woman shook her head. "Of course not. Above all else, despair makes a ghoul. Your love for each other has given you hope, and hope conquers despair." Rose felt a nauseating chill. "If I lose Lily..." Lily grabbed her hand, her eyes widening with the same fear. "None. It's like a vase molded from clay. You fire it, and it keeps its shape forever. They couldn't turn you completely, so you'll remain what you are, not quite one thing and not quite another." Rose squeezed Lily's hand, and both girls were relieved. Rose looked at Lily for a second. "So what are we then?" "Part of the ghoul. Ghoul are night runners, eaters of the dead." Rose's face contorted with disgust. Lily voiced her opinion. "Ew." Marie studied them for a while. "You crave human flesh?" Rose thought for a moment. "No, I don't think so. I've been hungry for so long, but I needed any food, not anything in particular." Lily nodded in agreement. "Even at night?" Lily shuddered. "No, but there were, in the darkness, voices, horrible voices. I could never hear them or understand what they were saying." Rose suppressed the lump in her throat. "They were always whispering and hissing. I was so glad I couldn't hear what they were saying." Marie shifted in her seat, then reached out to touch the face of each of them in turn and look into their eyes. Then she turned to Ken. "They are telling the truth. They will crave raw meat, but only meat. They will have to learn to control their anger." Ken relaxed, and Dietrich felt relieved. They talked for a few more minutes until Marie asked Lily and Rosa to go outside with her. "You getting close to Mr. Stanton?" Rose shrugged. "We both feel it. What does it mean?" "I'm not sure, but I'm sure it's a good thing if you can't stand a man." Lily chuckled. "We're not like that. We love each other, but it's not because we don't like guys." "You have to let him know about it." Lily smirked. "Oh, it will be, sister, as soon as we get some privacy. Don't doubt it." Marie smiled slightly. "I almost feel sorry for him." 6 months later, Agent John Dietrich entered the Voodoo Lounge as quietly as possible. The doorman didn't even look at him. Unshaven, in a rumpled suit, he hardly looked like a top-level treasury agent. He assured himself that he did, but it was mostly because he was exhausted. He looked around the crowded room for a minute until he saw Ken sitting at a table away from the bar. He was about halfway to the table when they approached him from both sides. "It was nice to meet you here, Agent Dietrich." "Good evening, Lily." Rose touched his other elbow. It would probably be easier to come into the library and meet us in the crypt if you wanted to talk. Thanks for that, by the way. Mrs. Crenshaw was very impressed to have a real treasury agent drop by to tell her how 2 of her library assistants had busted up a murder-for-hire gang. These days, it allows us to get away with murder. He grinned to himself. I'd prefer to talk to you in a brightly lit, crowded place, with lots of witnesses. Meeting you alone in a dark basement seems like it would be unwise. Lily poked him in the side. You don't trust us? He looked at them. Lily was wearing a white silk dress, and Rose was wearing an emerald green one. Both dresses were thin as thread, and hid almost nothing. I see you're not very shy these days. Rose smiled. Haven't you heard? There's a shortage of lingerie these days. John said nothing, slowly lowering himself into a chair, while the 2 girls slid around the table like wildcats and lowered themselves into chairs on either side of Ken, leaning lightly against him with wide smiles. Agent Dietrich kept his hands on the table. Ken. John, what can we do for you? I filed a report, told them exactly what happened. I half thought they were going to fire me or send me to a mental institution. 2 days after I filed the report, I was called into the secretary's office and told that the Treasury Department doesn't have the luxury of pretending nothing exists. The Secret Service is already looking into things like... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Like what we're facing. Rose leaned forward, her eyes darkening and her teeth lengthening for a second. Like us. If you cause trouble, yes. Other than that, it's pretty much hands off. Ken smiled slightly. You've been reassigned. I've been reassigned. Rose suddenly frowned, then sat back down. Wait, you said mostly. Why are you here? I need help. The Secret Service needs help. Lily shook her head. We're quite happy here. I wouldn't want to force you to help, but I'll help if you make me. Some of the things I've seen are pretty awful. I wouldn't have come here if I had a choice. Ken grimaced. We saw a couple critters here too, but we dealt with them ourselves. Turns out my girls smell trouble and are a little territorial. Rose rolled her eyes. Weird stuff happens here all the time. I don't know how we didn't notice before. She started counting off on her fingers. For instance, there was that giant reptile in the sewers, whatever it was. I'm even glad we never got a proper look at it. There was that headless guy who went around graveyards, that mad scientist. Lily interrupted her. That guy, what a thing to do, putting a girl's brain into a gorilla's body. Why? Why would anyone even want to do that? Rose raised her eyes to the sky for a second. Who knows? He was crazy, but it didn't work out for him. Cindy was mad as a hornet when she woke up, ripped his head off when we let her loose. Lily pressed her lips together. Marie fixed that, swapped them around, mostly of course. Cindy works at the zoo now and takes care of Coco, so no one even thinks it's weird. Cindy eats a lot of bananas, and Coco likes to wear dresses all the time. She shrugged. That was more fun than the guy with the giant brain in the vat. Those brain rays gave me a headache afterward. Rose contorted her face. And it tasted awful. I realize that you're the ones keeping this place in order, and the Secret Service thanks you for that. But this is a little different. We've had occult activity in Louisiana. We've lost 3 agents there already. A strange religious cult, summoning something from somewhere. Something big. Lily and Rose reached for each other's hand on the table. Lily sighed, frowning. That's a doozy. Why do I get the feeling we're still going to regret not eating you when we had the chance? That, my dear viewers, is the end of the last part of our exciting story. As we have already seen, our main characters, Rose and Lily, find themselves in yet another dangerous situation, this time facing the looming threat of the occult and a mysterious religious cult. But amidst the danger, they also discover a newfound sense of camaraderie with Ken, a mysterious figure who has become an integral part of their lives. Their journey from the depths of danger to glimmers of hope was filled with twists and turns that emphasized the resilience of the human spirit in the face of darkness. But what psychological conclusions can we draw from this passage? One key theme that emerges is the strength of relationships and bonds created in adversity. Rose and Lily's unwavering loyalty to each other, as well as their growing bond with Ken, emphasize the importance of companionship in overcoming life's hardships. Despite the suffering they have endured, they find comfort in each other's presence, forming a united front against the looming threats. Moreover, the arrival of Agent Dietrich marks a turning point in their journey as they face the daunting task of confronting occult forces beyond their understanding. This moment emphasizes the inevitability of change and adaptation in the face of changing circumstances. As they struggle with the unknown, they must use their inner strength and resilience to confront the darkness lurking on the horizon. In essence, this passage serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities of human nature and the indomitable spirit that perseveres in the face of adversity. Rose, Lily, and Ken embark on the next chapter of their journey, but one thing remains certain: the bonds that bind them together will help them through the trials that lie ahead. If you can't wait to hear all the details of their adventures, join us on Patreon, where an uncensored version awaits. Until next time, remember to treasure the connections that keep you going, and may you have the courage to face any challenges that come your way. Look forward to more stories of mystery and intrigue.